Hey guys, welcome to That Florida Feeling. How is everybody this week? I hope your guys are doing good. I hope that everybody's still recovering from the hurricane and making it better. I am really excited to see that Pine Island has a bridge and that Sanibel has a bridge. That's amazing progress. I know that those of you who live on Sanibel are probably super excited that you can actually drive on it on the 21st. It's only about a week away. That's great progress. Don't forget you can still donate through Publix, the Volunteer Florida, One Blood, and other hurricane programs. Just make sure that the link is secure. Don't fall for a scam, guys. I know that there's a lot of scammers out there right now preying on people who shouldn't be, and those lowest circle of hell for those kind of people. Also saw that there's a lot of people being arrested for looters. Go Lee County Sheriff. He's kind of been awesome through this whole process. I think it's great that he's protecting those who can't protect their stuff right now. So that's really awesome. Want to say thanks to everybody who has interacted with Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and the TikTok pages. You guys are awesome. I just can't thank you enough for helping make this podcast successful. Without you guys, there wouldn't be a podcast. So who's ready for Halloween? I am. Actually, I'm just ready for the candy. But no, this is actually one of my favorite times of the year. I love October. I love fall, spooky. And I do miss the colder weather some days. It's actually less humid here in Florida right now, and it's kind of nice. It was nice not to walk outside and be immediately needing to take another shower at 6 o'clock this morning. I do have to say, though, I was surprised that most of us are morning people. Although, shout out to all you honest people who are only a morning person for work. That is true honesty. But I feel that. I used to be like that, and then somehow, I guess my years of working at Starbucks just kind of made me into a morning person, whether I want to be or not. 8 a.m. is sleeping late. Woo! Also, I want to say that the fall treat surprised me. I'm really glad that apple cider won on the poll, and it was more popular than pumpkin pie. I can say this with extreme certainty, and I expect some hate. I am not a pumpkin spice fan. I do not like it. It is bleh. But there are a lot of people out there who like it, so props to you. Enjoy your fall drinks. Enjoy your fall favorites. Get ready for Halloween. Buy that candy. Nobody needs to know that you ate it all. Or at least that's what happens in my house. So today I'm going to talk to you about someone that had a pretty large impact on South Florida and the estate he lived on. And the estate he lived on actually still lives on in some very interesting ways. I'm, of course, talking about Charles Deering. If you haven't heard of him, I'm not surprised. He made an impact in the Miami area, but he's not from Florida. He's actually probably closer to one of the first snowbirds. He was in the same group with Flagler. So, thanks for starting that trend. Charles was actually born on July 31st, 1852 in South Paris, Maine. He served in the Navy. He was an amateur artist. He was a collector. He also served as chairman of the board of International Harvest Company. That company is the reason he had his fortune. The company was a manufacturer of agriculture and construction equipment, automobiles, commercial trucks, lawn, and garden products. Now, Charles Deering was introduced to Florida through his father, William Deering, because William started coming to the state in the 1890s. He visited St. Augustine, probably the Henry Flagler era, and then made his way to South Florida. And of course, Charles would come with him as well as his brother, and he fell in love with the Miami area. And so in 1908, he purchased 212 acres of land in Buena Vista, which is a neighborhood in Miami. He then hired Clinton Mackenzie in 1910 to design a Spanish-style villa. He also wanted the landscape architecture to lay out the grounds to make it beautiful and to make him have his own private garden. Since he was a huge supporter of the New York Botanical Garden, he loaned them 25 acres to grow cacti off of his 212 acres. So he was very much an environmentalist, a naturalist, and I think that's pretty cool. I think it was cool that he wanted to preserve things for future generations. But Deering was also friends with David Fairchild. If that name rings a bell, he's a well-known botanist, especially in the Miami area. And he allowed the U.S. Department of Ag, through Fairchild, to establish an experimental station on another 25 acres of the estate. Like I said, he was an avid naturalist and preservationist, and he wanted things to continue on. I think that's really cool that he not only bought all this land, but he used part of it for, environmental and good. Now, Deering was new to the area, but he could tell that the land boom was coming, and so he decided to buy land further down the coast along Old Cutler Road. And by 1915, he had acquired several hundred acres near Cutler and moved his winter quarters from where he was in Buena Vista to this Old Cutler Road area permanently. The initial estate in Buena Vista was broken up by developers in the land boom of 1925. So he had been on top of things and understood that this was coming. Now, the property he bought, he built a large stone house on his second property, and this is what is known now as the Charles Deering Estate. Fun fact though, do you remember how I told you that Deering had a brother, James? Or if I didn't, I at least said he had a brother. His name is James, and he built, his estate was Villa Vizcaya in Coconut Grove. You can actually also go visit that one as well. So both the Deering brothers had an extreme love for South Florida and left lasting estates. Now, Charles Deering lived on his estate, the second one he purchased, and eventually died on the property on February 5th, 1927. Now, he officially lived on his new estate for only 5 years. Well, the estate he had purchased was 444 acres, and it sits where the high ground of the Atlantic Ridge Rock and the fresh water from the Everglades meets the Biscayne Bay. So it's an absolutely beautiful area. And the estate that he bought already had a 3-story wooden house built in the 1900s known as Richmond Cottage. And then he built a 3-story stone mansion. Of course, the property also contained auxiliary buildings that were built to help run the estate. And the estate sits in the Cutler neighborhood of Palmetto Bay, Florida, near Miami. The grounds contain absolutely beautiful gardens, perfectly manicured gardens, but it also contains a lot of natural land, a lot of natural wildlife where they could continue to preserve and let the birds and the wildlife and the things just live in harmony on part of his land, which I think is really cool. But the grounds contain what is thought to be the largest virgin coastal tropical hardwood hammock in the continental U.S. So I think that's cool. He understood that nature was something to be preserved and that he realized that he had something rare and he chose not to tear it down. Now, the estate is under the control of the state of Florida right now. The estate was owned by Deering until his death in 1927, and then his family continued to maintain the property, and they did so until 1982 when his daughter died. The estate was then put up for sale, and it was purchased 2 years later in 1984 by Finley Matherson. And Finley Matherson knew that this was something special, and he wanted to get it turned into a state park, and they fought for that. And the state of Florida listened, and they finally purchased the estate in 1985 for $22.5 million. I'm sure it's worth actually probably way more than that, especially in these days. The estate is on the National Register of Historic Places as of a year later in 1986, so it is well protected. And it's also part of the Organization of Biological Field Stations, which is a collaboration with Florida International University School of Environmental Arts and Society. I have no idea why I said society like that. I'm just punctuating and addressing things. But the estate has been used for research because of its unique ecological, geological, and archaeological features that have been on the property, and it's been doing so for the last 30 years. The Deering Estate is really cool because it's also situated on the only portion of the Everglades Restoration Project in an urban setting that can actually be accessed by the public. So you can visit Miami, you can visit some beautiful manicured gardens, and you're still in the Everglades. And so I think that's pretty cool. I also think it's cool that they have fought to protect this land. Now, I told you that when he bought the property, there was already a building on the property, and that was the Richmond Cottage. Now, the cottage was built in 1900 as a wooden house by Samuel Richmond, and soon after it was built, they decided to add on, and then Edith Richmond, his wife, opened the house as an inn called the Richmond Cottage. And this was basically the only inn between Coconut Grove and Key West, so it was a very nice, very affluent, very well thought of place. And in fact, it attracted a lot of wealthy and celebrities, and mainly those that stayed at the inn included Henry Flagler and James Ingram, as well as many other travelers who passed through. Richmond Cottage was actually named the most southern hostelry. I have no idea what that word is, but it was in there and I wrote it. So, hostelry, whatever. I'm going to go with hotel. Southernmost hotel in the continental U.S. by the Miami metropolis in 1901. And the Richmond Cottage was the hotel to stay at in Cutler because of its amenities and the fact that it sat on this ridge and overlooked the bay. So not only was it nice, it was also beautiful. It had a beautiful scenery and outlook. And Charles Deering liked the area, and he actually bought the cottage in 1916. And over the next several years, he added different structures to the estate, such as the 3-story mansion, a carriage house, a pump house, a powerhouse, and he even enclosed the estate with a limestone and concrete wall. The house that he built on the property is actually a 3-story Mediterranean stone house, and it was built or designed by Phineas Peist and completed in 1922. So he actually lived in the Richmond house while it was being finished. The house has 18-inch poured concrete walls, Udallik limestone, coffered ceilings, and copper-clad and brass doors. But he gave the house a couple unique features, but probably the weirdest one is that he didn't have a stove, and he didn't want a stove in the stone house. The reason so is that he had seen what fire could do after the Great Fire of Chicago. He knew that it could destroy a property, and this actually scared him. So the kitchen house had a refrigeration cabinet and storage, but all the cooking was done up at the Richmond Cottage. His fear of fire is actually the reason for the 18-inch walls and brass doors that sit in the house today. Of course, he was ahead of his time when I say he added unique features. In fact, he included an elevator on the estate and a large wine cellar that was located on the first floor. Now, his house was really meant to be a showcase for his art collection and books. That's really what he was the most proud of on this estate, and that's really what he wanted to show off when he had guests to the estate. Now, of course, the estate was finished in 1922, which means it has weathered many, many storms. And it survived most of them, but it was finally heavily damaged by Hurricane Andrew, which doesn't surprise me. If you listen to the Hurricane Andrew episode, it was a Category 5, and it destroyed anything and everything in its path. But it didn't completely destroy the estate. It did heavily damage it, though. Water was 16 feet up the walls, and you can actually still see the water marks from the storm surge on the actual stone mansion, which meant that the entire first floor was flooded and damaged. Now, the damage did lead to a surprising discovery. Do you remember how I said that there was a wine cellar? Well, this wine cellar was actually not found until the cabinetry was being replaced from the hurricane. The cellar had been so well hidden in some built-in cabinetry and forgotten that nobody knew it existed until 1992. So 70 years later, they found the wine cellar. They didn't say if there was wine in it. That's really what I want to know. I'm like, so did you find wine? Was it still good? But yeah, it took them 70 years to find this wine cellar. It was so well hidden. Now, unfortunately, the Richmond Cottage, being a wooden house, was completely taken off its foundation and splintered by the hurricane. The damage to the actual estate cost about $7.2 million, and that was just to restore it. And when they did restore it, they kept the original columns, and they tried to restore it to as much as its former glory. It actually took 8 years to reopen after the damage of Andrew. Andrew hit in 1992, and it did not officially reopen until the year 2000. So 8 years later, after all the restorations had been done and all the rebuilding, it finally reopened to the grounds to the public. And of course, the grounds of the estate are just as interesting as the buildings that sit on the grounds. I told you that the estate was on some geological features, and it's actually on the Miami Rock Ridge, which has many different geological features just on the property alone. The property of the estate itself contains sinkholes, razor rock, and natural caves. And a huge sinkhole actually opened up in 1979 on the estate, and it was found to contain bones of Pleistocene animals that were associated with early humans, as well as fossils of flora and fauna of the humans that existed in this part of Florida. You can actually still see the site. It's on the grounds of the property. You can actually see it on the boardwalk. Now, the estate has many, many different features to it, and it is part of the Biscayne Bay IBA and the Great Florida Birding and Wildlife Trail. So, if you're on the property, there's a chance that you can see over 170 different species of birds if you visit the property throughout the year. You can even spot rare birds such as mangrove cuckoo. I've never been able to say that bird's name. I hope you guys know what I'm talking about. A white-crowned pigeon and the limpkin. And the grounds are perfect for bird watching. They offer, you can see migratory birds, wading birds, and even predatory birds. And they actually offer a guided bird walk on one Saturday of the month from October to May. So, it is October. If bird watching is your thing, check out the Deering Estate. You can go to their website to find out which day it is. Now, of course, I told you that the grounds sit right on the bay, and that's why it was so beautiful when the Richmond Cottage was the only inn in the area, and now it's the Deering Estate, and it's just a magnificent view. The waters behind the estate and actually adjacent to it are part of the Biscayne Bay Aquatic Preserve. And you can see things like West Indian manatees, small-toothed sawfish, American crocodiles, and even Johnson's seagrass. The preserve is also home to corals, sponges, and algae on the mangrove-lined shores. Okay, first of all, the crocodile. So I'm sure that there are alligators in this area. But now you got to deal with crocodiles? All right, look, one dinosaur-looking thing is enough for me. That would... I feel that this is the time that you insert the really bad joke of how do you tell the difference between an alligator and a crocodile. And if you know the joke, you're probably rolling your eyes at me because it's one of those really bad dad jokes. But do you know the difference? One you see later and one you see in a while. And I'm probably sure I just botched that joke. Okay, sorry. Thank you for still listening if you've continued past this point. The home is also home to the wading birds, like I said, and it's actually a valuable nursery area for juvenile fish. The Cutter Slaw is where the fresh water flows through the estate into Cutler Bay, and the area is to help with the conservation of the Everglades. So he knew what he had when he had the estate, and he was very intent, like his first estate where he gave land to grow cactus and to have environmental stations. He knew that this was an area that he wanted to preserve. And the estate is actually one of the few remaining environmentally endangered lands in the Miami-Dade County. So basically, the estate is a really cool outdoor classroom. Like I said, it pairs with Florida Atlantic University to be this classroom, and it contains pine rockland, tropical hammock hardwood, salt marsh, mangrove forest, and even barrier island habitats. So I think it's really cool that this estate has not only opened to the public to see how old Florida lived, but it's also a place where you can learn about what lives in and around Florida, what else calls it home other than humans. I think it's cool that they have definitely preserved that. Now, the grounds have had a long history before Charles Deering even set foot on the property, or even before the Richmond House. This area has had over 10,000 years of continuous human habitation, from the Paleo-Indian shelters to the Tequesta settlements, Seminole hunting grounds, and the Bahamian and Florida Cracker homesteads. The town of Cutler also inhabited the area before the state was even established. The Perrin Land Grant Township actually created a small town that included a post office, docks, and things to support the railroad. But unfortunately, the railroad moved further inland, which meant that parts of this area's town couldn't make it. So the people that inhabited it as a town just left. But that doesn't matter. The area still had many years of habitation, which means that the artifacts from the past have littered the ground. Fun fact, I always wanted to be an archaeologist, and I always thought it would be cool to go find fossils and to go dig up animals and to dig up artifacts. And then I did take a class for it. One of my college professors kindly pointed out that one man's trash is another man's artifact. And I don't know, that kind of disappointed me, but it's true. We learn from what people have forgotten, thrown away, or discarded. And that's really taught us about this area. Now, the grounds also contain a burial mound. The Cutler Burial Mound is on these grounds. The mound is a prehistoric mound that is one of the few prehistoric surviving mounds in the Miami-Dade County area. The mound is 38 feet by 20 feet at its base and about 5 feet high. And it contains artifacts from the periods known as Glades 2 and Glades 3. The mound, though, has been disturbed many times because people don't appreciate its history. Henry Perrin Jr., who was a idiot, he's another Florida person that I don't have a lot of respect for. He was a rich little boy who was rich off his dad's wealth and thought that he was going to go treasure hunting. And so he actually removed several skulls from this mound in the 1860s while searching for Black Caesar's treasure. Then, Ralph Monroe also dug into the mound in the 1890s. And since the mound really wasn't something that was protected until later on, in the 1900s, neighborhood children would dig up the mound and then remove bones and artifacts and take them home. Okay, I don't know about you guys, but that just screams haunting to me. I have never, ever wanted to dig up somebody's bones and take them home. Let the dead lie where they lay. That just invites bad juju. A few of the bones have been returned and reburied in the mound, which I'm sure settled some spirits. But the mound itself is actually believed to contain somewhere between 12 to 18 burials. And you can actually see this today if you walk the boardwalk on the estate. So you can see not only the sinkhole with the fossils, but you can also see the mound that shows the prehistoric living of Florida. Now, the estate is open today for visitors, which I've alluded to in most of this podcast. And you can see these amazing grounds and houses that Charles Deering left, which basically means that he left his mark on the Sunshine State, especially in Miami. He had a huge art exhibit, some of which is donated, some of which you can actually still see in the house today. He not only preserved the land for future generations, but also made sure that people were working to preserve the land, which I think is really cool. And the grounds are immaculate. You can visit the grounds, you can take tours. They actually have a bunch of different kinds of tours. They offer regularly scheduled events to showcase the grounds and the home that Charles Deering loved so much. I have seen pictures of this. I've not been here myself. I want to go. It is beautiful. It is absolutely beautiful. You can get married on these grounds, and I absolutely see why anybody would want to. But if you just want to go, I recommend that. They offer a lot of different group tours like kayaking the bay, bird walks, butterfly walks, and guided tours of the Richmond Cottage, photography tours, nighttime tours, many other fun tours. You can explore the grounds by yourself on a self-guided tours from 10 to 5, and you can go in the houses. They are open for exploration as well as the grounds. And if you do go, I recommend checking out the grounds. They're full of beautiful flora and fauna, wildlife, and of course the historic buildings. They do offer a self-guided nature preserve. Wow, words, you guys. Nature preserve tour daily from October to May. So go check it out now. Deering Point and People's Dock is also open from sunrise to sunset. Now, if you do visit the estate, the admission is $15 per person. Of course, they do give discounts to certain groups. But it's an amazing estate full of history that would be a great day trip. But it's not someplace I plan on going at night. And as you can tell, I'm sure you've figured out that I've alluded to it. The Deering Estate has some amazing history, but it also has a dark past. In fact, the Deering Estate is possibly one of the most haunted places in South Florida, if not all of Florida. And if this sounds familiar, if you listen to my Haunted Florida episode, I talked about this. But I felt that the estate itself was so cool that it deserved its own podcast. And not just because it's super haunted. The estate is actually so haunted that there's actually ghost tours you can take from September to October that allow you to see the paranormal activity that happens on the grounds. And since the estate does have over 10,000 years of history, it's not surprising that things stuck around. Especially with people digging up that burial ground. The grounds are said to be haunted by not one spirit, but many. If you're lucky, you might even see Mr. and Mrs. Deering. They're said to still be at the estate. I can imagine they loved it so much, and it's so beautiful. They also have a ghost named Peter. Peter's described as a little boy that's often seen on the tours. Peter's been known to talk to people on the tours and scare the crap out of them. The employees do lead ghost tours and have even talked about their experiences on the ground. Now, I want to mention something. The estate is owned by the state of Florida, which means that it is a state-run federal thing, government entity park. Which means that by offering these tours, the state of Florida even understands that these grounds are so completely haunted. I know that most national parks and state parks that are haunted, people want to look the other way. They don't want to talk about it. They kind of ignore it. No, not Florida. The Deering Estate is owned by the state of Florida and offers ghost tours. So you know that there is some validity to these claims. If even the state of Florida understands that this place is extremely haunted. In fact, the grounds are so full of spirits and that you just catch them on a daily basis. There are so many photos, photographic evidence, EVPs, that have come from this state. I mean, it's actually a hot spot of activity, and it doesn't surprise me. Everybody that came to these grounds probably fell in love with them for the views and just the calming sense you get when you're there. I'm sure, though, hurricanes and other natural disasters, war, anger, all these things have brought bad feelings to the grounds, and especially since you disturbed that mound numerous times. I think that alone is probably enough to cause the problems, or at least that's where my feeling goes for it. You can get EVPs, cold spots, feeling of being touched, feeling of being watched, and all these things are probably enough to make you go from skeptic to believer in one night. Now, of course, ghosts aren't on command, so I'm sure you could visit 4 out of 5 times and see something, and the 5th time see nothing, or the reverse. I'm not saying go to Deering Estate to become a believer. If you're a skeptic, absolutely stay skeptical. I was a skeptic until I had my own experience, so I get it. I get that me telling you, you're probably still going, yeah, okay, whatever. Or some of you are like, yep, I've been there. But believe whatever you want to believe, but just know that there's a lot of proof on these grounds. The grounds have been investigated many times by many different groups, and they all come out saying the same thing. It's not haunted, it's infested. Which leads me to believe that, yeah, there's probably some bad energy going on there. If you want to see it and you can't get to Florida right now, go on YouTube. There's plenty of videos, and you can even Google the photographic proof. I'm actually going to post one that I saw that is just creepy and unexplainable. So you'll see it on the Instagram today. Probably Facebook too. But nonetheless, Deering Estate is a beautiful place that many people have loved over lifetimes. I recommend going to the estate to see old Florida history, to take in the Indian mounds, to see the history of the state's past, and to watch the wildlife that inhabits the area. It's a fun place for a fun day in South Florida. Be careful if you go, and don't stay too late, because you might get bitten up by mosquitoes, you might get a sunburn, you might get dehydrated, or you might find a ghost that you didn't plan on seeing. But sometimes ghosts aren't the scariest things. Sometimes Florida man is worse. And buddy, Florida men do like South Florida. Today's Florida man might have made better decisions if he had just eaten before going shopping. Cops busted a man in Indiantown store when he had a rack full of ribs in the waistband of his pants. But that's not it. Because the ribs weren't enough, he also smuggled fried chicken, 2 packs of hamburger buns, and some mashed potatoes. So basically, guys, just don't shop hungry. It's not a good look. I hope that you guys enjoyed this week's episode about Deering Estate. I thought that it was a very interesting estate with some great history, and it definitely lends to the old Florida feel and some of the history of Miami. It also has a very creepy past, and since this is October, I couldn't pass up on the spooky part. Thank you guys for listening. I hope you have a great week. Don't forget to check out the Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok. If you do have a second, guys, I would really appreciate that 5-star review on Spotify and a 5-star review on Apple. And if you comment on Apple, it tends to get the review seen faster. Apple's weird. But yeah, a review would be great. Thank you guys. If you have the time, I would genuinely appreciate it. So, have a good week. Don't forget to look out for the poll in question on Wednesday. Drink your water. Wear your sunscreen. Be nice to one another. Donate if you can to the Hurricane Ian Relief Fund. And as always, guys, that's your daily dose of sunshine.